Massachusetts, 1947, Captain James "Jim" Harrison stood in front of 200 Air Force trainee pilots at Westover Field, Massachusetts. Behind him, a large diagram showed a Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress in profile, with technical markings indicating proper emergency landing procedures. "Gentlemen," Harrison began, "you're here to learn how to bring a damaged bomber home when the rulebook says it's impossible. 5 years ago, I had to make that choice." He clicked to the next slide. A photograph of a B-17 sitting on a runway, its underside scraped and torn, but intact. "October 14, 1944, my B-17 took heavy damage over Germany. Hydraulic system destroyed, no landing gear, no flaps, no brakes. Standard procedure required the crew to bail out over England while I attempted to land solo or went down with the aircraft." He paused, looking at the young faces watching him. "I had 10 crew members. 2 were wounded and couldn't jump. Regulations said they were acceptable losses. I decided regulations were wrong. This is the story of how we all came home." Part 1. Texas, 1938. James Harrison was 18 years old when he took his first paying job as a crop duster pilot in the cotton fields outside Lubbock, Texas. The airplane was a beat-up 1927 Stearman biplane that burned more oil than fuel and had a habit of losing power at the worst possible moments. The pay was terrible, $5 per field, and the work was dangerous. Crop dusting meant flying 20 feet above the ground, dodging power lines and tree lines, while agricultural chemicals leaked into the open cockpit. But Harrison loved it. Not the money or the chemicals, but the pure problem of keeping an unreliable machine in the air through skill alone. On August 12, 1938, the inevitable happened. Harrison was halfway through spraying a cotton field when the engine coughed, sputtered, and died. Altitude, 40 feet. Airspeed, 65 miles per hour. Time to impact, approximately 4 seconds. No time to think. Only react. Harrison pushed the stick forward slightly, trading altitude for airspeed to prevent a stall. He scanned ahead. Cotton field, relatively soft. He pulled the stick back gently, flaring the nose to reduce forward speed. The Stearman hit the cotton field hard, but survived the impact. The landing gear collapsed, the propeller bent, and the wings buckled, but the fuselage remained intact. Harrison climbed out with nothing worse than bruises. The field owner, Mr. Peterson, arrived in his truck 5 minutes later. "God damn it, Harrison, you wrecked my airplane. Your airplane had a dead engine. I saved the airframe. You can rebuild it. Rebuild costs money. Burying me would have cost more." Harrison gestured at the cotton field. "Plus, you'd have to explain why you had a dead pilot in the middle of your crop." Peterson grumbled, but eventually admitted Harrison was right. The Stearman was rebuilt. Harrison kept flying, but he learned something that day. Machines can be replaced. Pilots can't. Whatever it takes to save the pilot is the right decision. Part 2. England, March 1944. Lieutenant James Harrison, now 24 years old with 2,000 hours of flying time, reported to the 381st Bombardment Group at Ridgewell Airfield, northeast of London. The 381st flew B-17G Flying Fortresses on daylight bombing missions over Germany. Harrison was assigned as aircraft commander of B-17G serial number 4297563, which his crew christened Memphis Queen after the bombardier's hometown. The crew consisted of 10 men: Captain James Harrison, pilot 2nd Lieutenant David Thompson, co-pilot 2nd Lieutenant Carl Brewster, bombardier 2nd Lieutenant Robert Chen, navigator Technical Sergeant Frank Martinez, flight engineer and top turret gunner Technical Sergeant William Billy Jones, radio operator Staff Sergeant Eugene Parker, ball turret gunner Staff Sergeant Thomas Riley, left waist gunner Staff Sergeant Michael Sullivan, Right waist gunner, Staff Sergeant Joseph Joe Washington, tail gunner. They flew their first combat mission on March 20th, 1944, Berlin. 800 American bombers attacking the German capital in broad daylight. The mission was a nightmare. German fighters, flak so thick you could walk on it, B-17s exploding in fireballs, parachutes blooming across the sky. Memphis Queen survived undamaged, but Harrison watched 4 bombers from his group go down, 40 men dead or captured. That night, Harrison couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about one B-17 he'd seen crash on landing at Ridgewell. The bomber had taken flak damage over Germany, hydraulics partially destroyed, landing gear damaged but functional. The pilot attempted landing but lost control during touchdown. The B-17 ground looped, flipped onto its back, and burned. 8 of 10 crew members died, not from German fire, from the landing. Harrison asked the group engineering officer the next morning, "What's the survival rate for belly landings?" "Depends on the pilot, 30, maybe 40% if the pilot knows what he's doing, but most don't. They panic, come in too fast, nose digs in, plane flips, everyone dies." "Why don't we train for belly landings?" The engineer shrugged. "Standard procedure is to bail out if you lose hydraulics. Saves crew lives. The aircraft is considered expendable." "What if crew members can't bail out? Wounded, trapped?" "Then you've got hard choices to make, Lieutenant." Harrison filed that away. He hoped he'd never need it. Part 3. June-September 1944. Memphis Queen flew missions through the summer of 1944. Hamburg, Magdeburg, Ludwigshafen. Each mission was a calculated gamble. Would you survive the fighters? Would you survive the flak? Would you survive the landing? By September, Harrison and his crew had flown 22 missions. They needed 25 to complete a tour and rotate back to the States. 22 missions meant they were veterans. They'd learned to read the patterns of flak, anticipate fighter attacks, trust each other absolutely. But they'd also watched friends die. The 301st had lost 18 B-17s since Harrison arrived. 180 men dead or missing. On September 18th, Harrison witnessed something that changed his thinking about emergency landings. A B-17 from the 582nd Squadron, Desert Rat, took severe flak damage over Stuttgart. Hydraulic system destroyed. Pilot radioed, "Hydraulics gone, crew bailing out over England." Standard procedure. The crew jumped. 9 men descended under parachutes over the English countryside. 8 landed safely. 1 man's chute failed to open. He died on impact. The pilot tried to land the B-17 solo, lost control on approach, crashed into a field and exploded. Pilot killed. So standard procedure had resulted in 2 deaths. 1 from parachute failure, 1 from crash. Harrison ran the numbers. Desert Rat had 10 crew. Standard procedure, 2 dead, 8 survived. 80% survival rate. But what if the pilot had tried to land with crew aboard? If the landing succeeded, 100% survival. If it failed catastrophically, 0% survival. But skilled pilots were landing damaged B-17s every day. Harrison started watching belly landings closely. He talked to pilots who'd successfully landed without gear. He studied accident reports. He practiced emergency procedures, simulating approaches without flaps, calculating how much runway he'd need, learning to control a B-17 at high speed with minimal control surfaces. His co-pilot, Lieutenant Thompson, asked, "Jim, why are you obsessing over this?" "Because I don't want to order you to jump, Dave. I don't want to lose anybody because I wasn't prepared." Part 4. October 14th, 1944. Schweinfurt Mission Number 23. Ball-bearing factories at Schweinfurt, Germany. 360 B-17s. Deep penetration into German territory. Heavy fighter opposition expected. Briefing officer. Intelligence reports 200 fighters in the target area. FW-190s and BF-109s. Expect frontal attacks. The Luftwaffe knows these factories are critical. They'll defend hard. Harrison's crew loaded into Memphis Queen at 0630 hours. Engine start at 0645. Taxi at 07 Oro. Takeoff at 0715. Formation assembly over England took 40 minutes. Hundreds of bombers circling, finding their groups, settling into the combat box formation that provided mutual defensive fire. The bomber stream crossed the English coast at 8:30, course southeast toward Germany. German fighter opposition began over Belgium. FW-190s attacking from 12 o'clock high, head-on attacks designed to kill pilots and break formations. The B-17's defensive 50 caliber machine guns fired back, tracers crisscrossing the sky. Memphis Queen stayed in formation. Martinez in the top turret shot at a Bf-109 passing overhead. Chen, the navigator, called course corrections to Harrison. Brewster, the bombardier, prepared the bomb site. At 11:20, the formation reached Schweinfurt. Anti-aircraft fire erupted, black puffs of flak exploding at 25,000 feet, right in the middle of the bomber formation. Flak hit Memphis Queen immediately. A shell burst 30 feet below, spraying shrapnel upward. Fragments punctured the right wing, severed hydraulic lines, and tore through the bomb bay. Martinez shouted over intercom, "We've got hydraulic fluid everywhere. Lines are cut." Harrison checked his controls. Ailerons responded. Cable operated. No hydraulics needed. Elevator responded. Rudder responded. The flight controls worked. But the hydraulic systems, landing gear, flaps, brakes, turrets, were dead. Thompson said quietly, "Jim, we have no gear, no flaps, no way to stop after landing." Harrison focused on the immediate problem. "We still have a mission. Brewster, can you drop bombs?" "Checking. Yes, sir. Manual release works." Then we finish the mission. The B-17 formation approached the target. Brewster synchronized the bomb sight. Bombs away. 12 500-pound general-purpose bombs fell from Memphis Queen's Bay. The bomber stream turned west, heading home. That's when the second wave of fighters hit. Part 5, Decision Point 20. Bf-109s attacked the formation from 5 o'clock high. They targeted stragglers and damaged bombers. Memphis Queen, leaking hydraulic fluid and flying slightly out of formation, was an obvious target. 2 Bf-109s focused on Harrison's B-17. 20-meter cannon fire stitched across the nose, shattering the plexiglass bombardier's compartment. Lieutenant Brewster died instantly. 3 cannon shells hit him in the chest. More rounds hit the radio compartment. Sergeant Jones, the radio operator, took shrapnel to his left leg. Deep wounds, heavy bleeding. The tail gunner, Washington, reported, "I'm hit. Shrapnel in my shoulder. Can't move my right arm." The Bf-109s broke off, diving away. Harrison assessed damage. Brewster, dead. Jones wounded, arterial bleeding, possibly fatal without immediate medical attention. Washington wounded, possibly could bail out, but it would be extremely difficult and dangerous. Thompson looked at Harrison. "Standard procedure." "I know the procedure." Harrison keyed the intercom. "Crew, listen up. We've lost Brewster. Jones and Washington are wounded. Hydraulics are completely gone. We have no landing gear, no flaps, no brakes." He paused. The crew waited. "Standard procedure says you all bail out over England. I attempt to land alone. But Jones can't jump. He'd bleed out before hitting ground. Washington probably can't jump either with his shoulder. So here's what I'm offering. Anyone who wants to jump, jump. No judgment. You've got every right. But I'm going to try to land this airplane with everyone aboard. It's going to be dangerous. 50-50 chance we all die. But it's the only way Jones and Washington survive." Silence on the intercom for 5 seconds. Then Martinez, the flight engineer. "Skipper, I didn't join this crew to jump out when things get tough. We land together." Parker, the ball turret gunner. "I'm with Martinez." Riley and Sullivan, the waist gunners, together. "We're in." Chen, the navigator. Bail out at 23 missions? Not a chance. Thompson looked at Harrison and smiled. You're stuck with me, Jim. Let's bring her home. Harrison felt something catch in his throat. These men were trusting him with their lives. All right, everyone to crash positions. This is going to be rough. Part 6, Preparation. Memphis Queen crossed the English Channel at 12,000 feet. Harrison radioed Ridgewell. Base, Memphis Queen. Complete hydraulic failure. Landing gear inoperative. Flaps inoperative. Brakes inoperative. 2 crew KIA, 2 wounded. Request emergency equipment and cleared runway. Ridgewell Tower. Memphis Queen, copy all. What are your intentions? I'm bringing the crew home. We'll belly land on runway 27. Long pause. Then, Memphis Queen, command recommends crew bailout per standard procedure. Negative base. I have wounded who can't jump. Entire crew staying aboard. We're landing in 30 minutes. Another pause. Harrison could imagine the discussion in the tower. Finally, Memphis Queen cleared for emergency landing runway 27. Wind is 280 at 8 knots. Emergency equipment standing by. Good luck. Harrison began preparing. He had 30 minutes to solve a problem that killed pilots regularly. Problem 1, landing speed. B-17s normally landed at 90 miles per hour, with full flaps extended. Flaps increased drag and allowed slower landing speeds. Without flaps, Memphis Queen would land at 140 miles per hour, 50% faster. Problem 2, no brakes. Even if Harrison landed perfectly, the B-17 would roll 2,000 feet before friction stopped it. Ridgewell's runway was 6,000 feet long, enough room if nothing went wrong. Problem 3, the nose. When a B-17 belly landed, the critical moment was keeping the nose up. If the nose dropped and dug into the runway, the bomber would cartwheel and explode. 70% of failed belly landings happened because the nose dropped. Harrison had watched belly landings. He'd studied films. He knew the theory. Control the descent angle. Flare hard just before touchdown. Use elevator control to keep the tail low and nose high. In theory, simple. In practice, extremely difficult, because every instinct told pilots to push the nose down to see the runway. He also knew he'd have one chance. No go-around, no second attempt. Land or die. Thompson was watching him. What are you thinking? I'm thinking about a steerman in a Texas cotton field. I dead-sticked that landing because I didn't have time to panic. Same principle here. Except the steerman didn't have 9 other people aboard, which means I can't afford to fail. Part 7, the approach. At 12:40, Harrison began his descent toward Ridgewell. Altitude, 8,000 feet. Distance, 15 miles. He flew a wide pattern, bleeding off altitude gradually. Chen was giving him precise navigation. Harrison needed to approach the runway perfectly aligned because without flaps, he couldn't make tight turns. Martinez was treating Jones in the radio compartment, tourniquet on the leg, pressure on the wound. Washington in the tail was conscious but in pain. Everyone else was in crash positions. Chen, Thompson, Martinez, Parker, Riley, Sullivan, all braced for impact. Harrison could see Ridgewell Airfield ahead. 2 ambulances and a fire truck were positioned near the runway. The tower had cleared all other aircraft. Runway 27 stretched out 6,000 feet of concrete. Thompson read the checklist. Mixture, full rich. Props, full forward. Fuel, switching to fullest tanks. Gear, Harrison reached for the gear lever, knowing it wouldn't work. Gear is inoperative. We're going in on the belly. Flaps, inoperative. Thompson put down the checklist. All right, let's do this. Harrison aligned with the runway at 2,000 feet altitude, 3 miles out. Airspeed, 160 miles per hour. He started a shallow descent, aiming for the runway threshold. Tower. Memphis Queen, wind is 290 at 10 knots. Runway is clear. Copy, tower. 1,000 feet, airspeed 155, descent rate 500 feet per minute. The runway was visible ahead, a long gray strip. Thompson called altitudes, 500 feet, 400, 300. Harrison's hands were steady on the yoke. He'd practiced this in his head 100 times. Now he just had to execute. 200 feet, 100. The runway threshold passed beneath them. Harrison was 50 feet above the concrete, descending. He needed to time this perfectly. 50 feet. Harrison pulled back on the yoke, flaring the nose up. The B-17's descent slowed. The bomber hung in the air for 2 seconds, nose high, tail low. Then the tail struck the runway. Part 8. Landing. The impact sounded like a thunderclap. Metal screamed against concrete. The B-17's belly hit the runway and started sliding forward at 130 miles per hour. Sparks flew. Sections of aluminum skin peeled away. The bomb bay doors, already damaged, tore off completely. The bomber shuddered and groaned, but Harrison kept the yoke pulled back, forcing the nose to stay up. His arms burned from the effort. Thompson grabbed the yoke too, both pilots pulling with all their strength. The B-17 slid forward, 600 feet, 800 feet, 1,000 feet. The nose wanted to drop. Physics demanded it. The center of gravity, the friction, everything was trying to pitch the nose down. Harrison pulled harder. Come on, come on! 1,200 feet. The bomber was slowing. 110 miles per hour, 100 miles per hour, 90, 1,500 feet. The nose started dropping despite Harrison's efforts. The front of the bomber tilted forward, the plexiglass nose section approaching the runway. "Hold it!" Thompson shouted. Both pilots pulled with maximum force. Harrison felt muscles tearing. Didn't matter. Had to keep the nose up. 1,800 feet, 80 miles per hour, 70 miles per hour. The nose was 12 inches from the concrete. 10 inches, 8, 2,000 feet, 60 miles per hour, 6 inches, 2,200 feet, 50 miles per hour, 4 inches. The B-17 stopped. The nose was 3 inches above the runway. The tail was on the ground. The bomber rested on its belly, broken but intact. Silence. Then Martinez over the intercom. "Mother of God, we're alive." Harrison's hands were shaking. He looked at Thompson. "Everybody out, now, fire risk." The crew evacuated through the waste windows. Emergency crews arrived with stretchers for Jones and Washington. Everyone else climbed out under their own power. Harrison was the last to leave. He stood on the wing and looked at Memphis Queen. The bomber's entire underside was scraped away. The tail was crushed. The nose was millimeters from catastrophic failure. But they'd made it. 9 men alive. Against regulations, against procedure, against the odds. Part 9. Consequences. Harrison expected a court-martial for violating direct orders. Instead, he was summoned to 8th Air Force Headquarters 2 days later. General James Doolittle, commanding general of the 8th Air Force, met him personally. "Captain Harrison, you disobeyed a direct order to evacuate your crew." "Yes, sir." "2 of your crew were wounded and couldn't jump. Is that correct?" "Yes, sir. Technical Sergeant Jones and Staff Sergeant Washington." "How are they?" "Jones lost his leg below the knee. Washington will recover fully. Both are alive." Doolittle nodded. "And your crew refused to bail out?" "I gave them the option, sir. They chose to stay." "Why did you attempt the landing instead of following procedure?" Harrison thought about how to answer. "Sir, I've been flying for 6 years. I've made emergency landings. I knew I could do it, and I wasn't willing to order men to jump when I had a better option. Even though regulations say crew evacuation is the safer choice. Regulations are written for average pilots in average situations, sir. This wasn't average." Doolittle smiled slightly. "No, it wasn't. Captain, I've watched the film of your landing. The tower filmed it. Your technique was flawless. You kept that nose up through sheer force when every other pilot would have lost it. Thank you, sir. How did you learn to do that? Practice, sir, and one emergency landing in a cotton field in Texas when I was 18. Doolittle laughed. Texas crop dusters should have known. He became serious. Captain, I'm not court-martialing you. You saved 9 lives, including your own. But I need to ask, can you teach other pilots what you did? Yes, sir. Then here's your new assignment. You're grounded from combat. Instead, you're going to write emergency landing procedures for the entire 8th Air Force. Every B-17 pilot will learn your technique. Can you do that? Yes, sir. Good, because we lose too many crews to landing accidents. You just proved there's a better way. I want that better way standardized. Epilogue, Westover Field, 1947. Captain Harrison finished his lecture to the trainee pilots. The technique saved my crew. It saved hundreds of crews since 1944. It will save you someday. But remember the most important lesson. Regulations exist for good reasons, but sometimes the right decision is breaking regulations to save lives. You have to know when. A young lieutenant raised his hand. Sir, how did you know when to break the rules? Harrison thought about it. When following the rules would have killed people I could save. That's when. After the lecture, Harrison walked outside. A B-17 was parked on the ramp, a training aircraft. He stood looking at it, remembering Memphis Queen. Jones had retired from the service with a prosthetic leg and become a schoolteacher in Ohio. Washington fully recovered and flew 20 more missions before the war ended. Thompson became a commercial airline pilot. The others scattered across America, living the lives they'd almost lost over Germany. They sent Harrison Christmas cards every year. In 1946, all 9 survivors reunited at Ridgewell Airfield for a memorial service for Lieutenant Brewster, the bombardier who hadn't made it home. Standing there now, Harrison thought about that day in October 1944, the moment he decided to risk everything on one landing, the moment his crew chose to trust him. The mathematics were clear. Standard procedure would have resulted in 1 or 2 deaths. Harrison's choice resulted in only Brewster's death, and Brewster had died from German fire, not the landing. 8 men saved who would have died otherwise, all because one pilot refused to accept that impossible meant impossible. Harrison had learned that lesson in a Texas cotton field. He'd proven it over England, and now he was teaching it to the next generation. Airplanes can be replaced. People can't. Whatever it takes to save the crew is the right decision. Always.